Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Comet Tier 7 British medium tank. As I've done recently, just a quick little bit of historical background for you before we get on to how this machine performs in-game. So the Comet was developed and deployed towards the end of the Second World War, and it was based on the Cromwell. As you can see here, you can see the similarity between the chassis. It was based on the Cromwell tank, but with a variety of upgrades, part of which were inspired by the requests and needs, if you will, of the crew who drove the tanks, and part for sort of tactical battlefield reasons. And this is a kind of horribly overlooked machine historically. It's often overshadowed because it came right towards the end of the Second World War, so it didn't really have a great deal to do. So if you think of mid-20th century tanks, that were involved in that conflict, you think of the Sherman, you think of the Tiger, you think of the Panther. If you're thinking of British tanks, you maybe think of the Churchill, perhaps the Cromwell. The Sherman Firefly really springs to mind, although that wasn't really a true British tank, but never mind. This doesn't really enter the fray, but it kind of deserves its own place in history. So this is arguably one of the first, if not the first, main battle tank that was really introduced. And so you're reaching that point where the ideas of light tanks, medium tanks, heavy tanks, tank destroyers, all these different types of independent machine are all kind of being merged into one universal machine. Or if you're looking at it from the British perspective, you're starting to get the merging of the cruiser and infantry tank ideals together into one package. This is technically, I guess, the last tank, the last of the British cruiser tanks, and so it follows on from such machines as the early Mark cruisers, the Cromwell, Crusaders, Covenanters, things like that. But anyway, so what was it that they actually did with this machine? Well, essentially it was a Cromwell that was firstly given thicker armour plating. One of the complaints, while the Cromwell was very popular with crew, one of the complaints about it was that the armour was pretty thin and very, very flat. And so the Comet upped the hull armour somewhat and considerably upped the turret armour to give the crew some added protection. One thing you will see that's not changed about it is, despite the fact that this is a late war design, it's still a very, very boxy machine, and this reflects the British attitude to what made a good tank. If you introduce a lot of sloping to the armour, yes, it makes the armour more effective, but you also decrease the amount of available room inside the machine in which the crew can work, which means either A, you have a very large, cumbersome machine, or B, you have a very cramped machine for your crew to work in, perhaps cutting down on the crew members, and that decreases the comfort of the crew that are manning it, and that decreases the efficiency of the machine. So the British doctrine at this point was still flat armour, more space, crew work more efficiently. So as I say, the Comet introduced a number of improvements over the Cromwell. Firstly, it had better armour. Secondly, it had substantially better gun depression, allowing it to just sort of poke over hill lines and take shots at opponents off in the distance. And thirdly, the last point I would like to raise is the increase in firepower. In the game, we have the Cromwell running around, if it's fully upgraded, with this 75mm Vickers high-velocity gun. In practice, however, the Cromwell usually ran around using the little short, stubby 75mm gun. If I can just show you the weapon that I mean, if we go and have a look at the Excelsior, it's this gun, this stubby little 75mm weapon. That's usually what the Cromwell ran around with, and Churchill's also tended to go around with this gun. It was the standard British 75mm weapon. So part of the design spec was to have a tank specifically designed to be able to mount a gun capable of killing a Tiger from a decent effective combat range, a Tiger or a Panther or whichever German machine you're referring to, from a decent effective combat range. Now, this had already been tried out to a certain extent with the Sherman Firefly. They took a 17-pounder gun and whacked it in the turret of a Sherman. The problem with this is that they had to turn the breech sideways in order to even fit the gun in the turret, and so you had quite cramped working conditions. And so while the Firefly was a very important machine toward the latter stages of the Second World War, I think you'd be very hard-pressed to say it was a particularly good machine. The Comet, however, was designed from the outset to mount a gun capable of killing a Tiger, for instance. And so it mounted this 77mm gun. It's basically a cut-down version of the 17-pounder. The 17-pounder would have struggled to fit into a turret that the Cromwell could accommodate, realistically. And they wanted to have this kind of low-profile turret, as it was more effective when you were trying to go hull down and use hills to your advantage. And so this was a cut-down version of the 17-pounder gun, which means it wasn't quite as effective as the 17-pounder. It lost a little bit of penetration. And so it wasn't, you know, as good at engaging tigers and panthers as a 17-pounder, but it was pretty good at it. And so what you got with this was, in one package, a tank that had the armour to shrug off light anti-tank weapons and medium, sort of light-medium anti-tank weapons, howitzers, things like that, to provide the crew with additional protection. I mean, an 88mm shell from a Tiger was still probably going to give you problems unless it hit the turret and you got a little bit lucky. But you had added protection to light and medium anti-tank weapons and artillery. You had the mobility to still be effective and get around on the battlefield, and you had the firepower to kill whatever it came across. So this is why you can kind of start considering this one of the first main battle tanks to be introduced. Now, in practice, this thing didn't serve for all that long. It kind of got overshadowed as in the mid to late 1940s and into the 1950s, the British developed and implemented the Centurion series of tanks in particular. But nonetheless, I think this machine deserves its place in history. So that's the historical context for this thing. What do you get in the game? Well, firstly, it sits at tier 7 and has 1,150 hit points, which is pretty typical for the tier. It's nothing particularly special. 33-ton weight limit, again, nothing particularly special. 650 horsepower engine, giving this thing actually a very, very, very respectable specific power of 19.7 horsepower per ton when fully upgraded, which means that this thing accelerates fairly well. It's not the lightning whippet that the Cromwell was, but it does accelerate reasonably well. Top speed of 51.5 kilometers per hour. Again, it's not the completely lightning fast tank the Cromwell was, but that's certainly a very healthy top speed limit to have. Traverse speed of 36 is okay, nothing particularly special. Turret traverse of 46 is perhaps slightly better. I'll talk about the armour in a bit more detail later, but the armour on this is 76mm to the front of the hull, 43 to the sides, 32 to the rear. So it's slightly up-armoured over the Cromwell, but to be honest, because it's a tier higher, the effective armour on the hull is probably actually worse. The turret is 111, 63, 57. As I say, I'll talk about this in more detail later on, but unlike the Cromwell, you do actually get a gun mantlet worth talking about. It's not just an internal affair that a lot of the early to mid-tier British machines get. It's a proper external gun mantlet. 380 metre view range, which is actually quite nice. It's not the best. I think the T20 gets 390, but it's pretty respectable, and a 700 metre signal range. So what else do you get with this machine? Well, we should probably talk about the guns. Now, there's a variety of guns that you can use on this thing, but if you have any common sense, you will only ever use 2 of them. You have these 2 guns. You have the same 3.7-inch howitzer that you've been mounting, that you could have mounted on the Cromwell, that you can basically mount on the 82. It's your standard tier 5 derp gun, and you really don't want to be using it at tier 7 if you can possibly avoid it. And you can possibly avoid it. You have your 75mm gun Mark V. That's that horrible, short, little stubby 75mm gun that never excited anybody ever. Then you have the 75mm Vickers HV gun. Now, if you've got any common sense, you'll have already unlocked this as the top gun on the Cromwell, so you can just whack it straight into the Comet. And it's not a bad gun at all. And then you upgrade to the 77mm. So I'm just going to compare the 75 and 77mm guns. So, what do we get? Now, it should be pointed out that you get an upgrade to the stats of these guns when you go from the stock turret to the top turret, so that's worth noting. But look at the stats of these guns, and you'll notice they are almost identical. The quick-firing 77mm is a slightly larger caliber gun, 76.2mm rather than 77, but it's called a 77mm gun for strange magical reasons that I don't really understand. 15.38 rounds a minute. 145 penetration, goes up to 148 with the 77mm. Wow, 3 extra whole millimeters. With APCR, you go from 202 to 208, an extra 6mm. Alpha damage goes from 135 to 140, who cares? HE alpha damage goes from 175 to 190, which is a nice upgrade, and the other stats are identical. It's slightly heavier. So essentially, this is basically the same gun that you used on the Cromwell. However, mounted on the Comet with the top turret, you have 0.34 dispersion at 100 meters, so it's accurate, and an okay 2.3 second aim time. So the gun a lot of people find disappointing. It just feels like the same gun you were using on the Cromwell, because it basically is, with some small buffs. However, there are some things you should note with this. The 15.38 rounds per minute gives the Comet the highest DPM of any tier 7 medium tank, which is a nice feature. The kind of lackluster penetration of just under 150 may sound underwhelming, but firstly, it's about the same as you get on a lot of the other tier 7 medium tanks, and secondly, the accuracy means that you can actually make use of that. So a lot of people see the gun on the Comet as a downside. I don't. I see it as a gun that forces you to play this tank as a flanking tank. Some people see this gun as a reason to spam all of the premium ammunition. Again, I disagree with this. I think if you're just loading this up with full APCR and sniping people from a distance, you're doing it wrong. You're also costing yourself an awful lot of money. So the gun's not bad. In my opinion, the gun's fairly respectable. It has its downsides, but it's certainly not a bad gun. We've spoken about the mobility. I'm going to talk about the grind next. What is the grind like? Well, the rest of the British medium line. Okay, so you go through this, you get to the Cruiser 3, Cruiser 4, low tier tanks, good gun depression, garbage armour, they accelerate well but they don't have great top speeds. I've found these to be pretty fun. Covenanter at tier 4 is a light tank but does not get scout matchmaking. Again, it behaves more like a medium tank, all of these three do, and I found it to be good fun again. Crusader, again, light tank, no scout matchmaking, behaves like a medium tank. Some people like this, some people don't. Wasn't my favourite machine, but it wasn't completely terrible. It's pretty standard for your tier 5 kind of medium tank, and it is basically a medium tank sort of machine. Cromwell is lightning fast little whippet, so much fun. I've done a separate review on that, by all means go and take a look at it. And then you get to the Comet. Now, the mistake a lot of people make when they look at this tech progression is they expect the Comet to be like the Cromwell, and then when it's not, they're disappointed and say the Comet's a bad tank. This is the wrong perspective to have. Sorry. It's not the Comet that's unusual after the Cromwell. It's the Cromwell that's unusual within the British medium tank line. Every other tank within this line behaves like a standard medium tank. Even if they call it a light tank, it doesn't matter. Has reasonable acceleration, an okay top speed, good gun depression, armour's a bit dubious. Tiers 2 to 5 are all like that. Tier 6 is weird. The Cromwell is kind of the love child between an ELC and a Sherman. It's a strange machine. It's a medium tank, but it's really fast. Has absolutely no armour, but a good gun. It's great fun, but it doesn't fit in with the rest of the tech line. The Comet is a return to that tech line. So really, you could look at this tech line and say, well, actually, you have medium tank at tiers 2, 3, 4, 5, a bizarre light tank at tier 6, and then you're back to a medium tank at tier 7. The Cromwell is the aberration. It's not the Comet that's the aberration. If you wanted a tech line that was kind of continuous in playstyle, you'd replace the Cromwell with the Easy 8 Sherman, the American tier 6 medium. And actually that's basically what the Comet is like. It is like a tier 7 Sherman. If you compare the two tanks, you have bad armour on the hull, you have armour on the turret that can give you a bounce but you shouldn't be relying upon it, decent acceleration, an okay top speed, excellent gun depression. This thing gets minus 12 degrees, the same as the Sherman. A gun that's rapid firing but has low alpha damage, like the Sherman. This one is accurate though. The Sherman's gun wasn't really that accurate. This thing is basically a tier 7 Sherman, and that's the mindset you should get yourself in rather than a tier 7 Cromwell. Don't compare it with the Cromwell. It's just a completely different machine. So what's the actual grind on this thing like? So, you get to this, you look at the engine. This is the same engine that you used on the Cromwell. Hurrah! Radios, if anybody actually cares. This is actually not the same as on the Cromwell, the top radio at least. What about the middle one? Yeah, the middle one. So you'll have the middle radio from the Crommy when you initially play this. But I mean, none of these radios are particularly good, if I'm going to be brutally honest. The top one's alright, but these two are a bit cruddy. The stock turret, yeah, you're not going to have the upgraded turret, and you'll have this 75mm gun from the Cromwell. So stock configuration is Vickers high velocity, stock turret, middle radio, top engine. Fair enough. What should be your first priority? Unlocking this upgraded turret, because it's the turret that gives you the 12 degrees of gun depression and at least some armour, which is nice. And from there, go in whichever order you think. Probably leave the radio till last, upgrade the gun, then upgrade the radio, upgrade the suspension whenever you have to, and then you have an eleted Comet. It's not actually a particularly nasty grind, but the stock turret is pretty bad. It's basically the same turret from the Cromwell, and so you don't get the 12 degrees of gun depression, and you don't get the turret armour, and it's those two things that kind of make the Comet the Comet. Crew skills, consumables, equipment. I've gone for the standard consumables. You could swap one out for like pudding and tea or something, I guess, if you really wanted to. Fires on this aren't a massive problem. You could also swap it out for 2 repair kits. I have noticed the ammo rack is a little bit dubious. The ammo rack appears, just for the record, to be mounted in the side here, so you have to be very careful when side scraping it, in case shots just go straight into your side, which is bad. But I've got the standard 3 consumables. Equipment, you could use your standard grinding equipment. I've got gun rammer, optics, and a vertical stabilizer. After the Americans, this is the only tier 7, so apart from the T20 and the T29, this is the only tier 7 that can mount a vertical stabilizer. I suggest you do that. You could swap out the optics for binos, I guess, or for... oh, what's the other one? Where is it? Come here, little piece of equipment. It's the vents, that's the one. Vents. But this would be my recommended setup. As I say, you might want to swap out optics for vents. Crew skills, 6th sense on your commander, safe storage on your loader, repairs on everyone else basically. That should see you golden. So, without any further ado, let's have a quick look at some gameplay. Okay, let's talk about armour. So here we have the Comet, the tank in question. Let's bring up the armour scheme. Boom, there we go. Right, time to point out some things and dispel some notions about this machine. So, firstly, your armour at the sides and the rear is bloody awful. This toolbox is not actually a hitbox, so don't worry yourself about that. If people shoot you in the side here, it will just pass straight through and do no damage. Rear armour, 32. Rear of turret, 57. You can get penned here. You may even get penned by HE in the rear of your hull. And of course you've got a nice big engine deck for artillery to smash open with its face. Side of the tank, 32. Still, i.e. garbage. Utter garbage. Now you've got this little pokey out bit here that counts as spaced armour. And of course your tracks count as spaced armour, but let's be honest, the side armour of this tank is terrible. Now, this brings us to one point, I guess. You might want to, for instance, side scrape around a corner to try and mitigate the amount of damage that you receive in this thing. However, this comes with a couple of big problems. Well, firstly, your side armour is 32mm thick. That means it will be completely overmatched by a gun that has a caliber thrice the thickness of that armour, i.e. 96mm. Now, I'm not aware of any 96mm caliber gun in the game, but that means that any gun that is 100mm caliber or greater will just pen you in the side, and there's nothing you can do about it. And as far as I can work out, this tank stores its ammo racks in the side of the hull, so you have to be really careful when doing that, and a lot of the time you might actually find it preferable to just accept the fact that you're going to take damage, assuming, you know, they've got a decent caliber gun, and just poke the front of the tank out so that you don't get your ammo rack damaged, but that's not without its risks as well. So what about the front of the hull? Well, lower plate is 76mm thick. Oh wow. Yeah, just no. Same as the mid plate of the tank. This sloped part is only 32mm thick, so the angling, you may as well not even be there. Basically, the entire front of your hull is a massive shoot-me zone. It is not very well armoured at all. Turret. Popular misconception that the Comet, Cromwell, the Comet is a very well armoured machine on the front of the turret. This is incorrect. This is a notion that has been perpetuated by some other YouTubers, but this is wrong. The armour that the Comet has is on the front of the turret. That is where the tank's best armour is, but that doesn't mean it's any good. And it's situational. So what have you actually got? You have 111, that's all the ones, 111 millimeters of armour on the front of your turret. So you can bounce tier 5s, tier 5 light tanks, some tier 6 light tanks, but most tier 6 medium tanks have 150 odd penetration. Most tier 6 light tanks have around 120. Yeah, now you start seeing the problem. Back that up with the turret roof. So firstly you have this giant great commander's hatch, which is actually the same thickness as the front of your turret. It's not even technically a weak spot, apart from the very top part that is 51mm thick if someone can be bothered to snipe that very top part, but they won't for a reason I'll get to in a moment. So this isn't particularly a weak spot. The main problem with it is of course that it juts out the top of your tank. So you will show this, and it doesn't matter how much of your gun depression you use, someone is going to be able to see this. So if you can shoot them, they can most definitely shoot you. In fact, they will be able to shoot you before you can shoot them, which is frustrating. Which brings us on to the turret roof. This turret roof, right, this is 51mm thick. Great, okay. It's angled back at a very sharp angle of 72 degrees, making it an auto bounce zone. Hurrah! That is actually quite good. And so you can actually get people shoot here, and their shot will just bounce off. Unless, of course, they've got an angle ever so slightly down onto you. In which case, suddenly, this isn't looking quite so hot. So you always want to be in a position where you are using your gun depression, you are above someone, so to speak, so that you do not flatten the angle out of this turret roof. That minimises the flip side is that minimises their shot at your turret roof and still gives them a shot at that blasted great commander's hatch. What about the gun mantle? Well, there we have 111mm, 55mm of gun mantlet, so this top strip is around 180mm thick. There are regions that are over 200, and there is of course a hole where the gun is. Bottom strip, 111 with 110mm. So you can get 280 in places, but you can also get 147. Basically, the gun mantlet can save you, but do not rely upon it. It is not a guaranteed bounce by any stretch of the imagination. Essentially, when you go hull down in this tank, you do not do it to become an invincible behemoth of destruction that cannot be damaged, like the T-29. You mainly do it to minimise the shots that other people have at you, to present a very small surface area for them to shoot at. This is quite a low profile machine. If you use all 12 degrees of your gun depression, which you should at every available opportunity, you only present this very low profile turret and your commander's tumour on top. And that's how you want to be playing this tank. You want to be using ridge lines to make that gun depression, and to try and outplay people, I guess, like that. But do bear in mind, the turret front on this tank is not indestructible, has a nice big obvious shoot me sign sitting on top of it, and if anyone gets shots into your hull, it's going to get very, very messy very quickly. Unless, of course, you can out-DPM them, and if you're going to out-DPM them, try and make sure you don't give them too much of your side armour, because they will pen it and probably damage your ammo rack, which is bad. So that's the armour on this thing. Let's go and have a quick look at some gameplay.
Here is game number 1. We are top tier in a standard battle on Ruinberg. Now, the Comet is one of those tanks that really likes a good matchup. It loves tier 7 games, it's not such a fan of tier 9 games, and so you might actually expect that the tier 7 game is going to be the one where I do well in, and the tier 9 game might be a bit dubious. Kind of the other way round. This tier 7 game is actually going to highlight one of the weaknesses of the Comet. So the single best thing about the Comet is the 12 degrees of gun depression. The second best thing about the Comet is the DPM. The third best thing about the Comet is the accuracy on the gun, I guess, and the mobility is alright. Now, as I discussed earlier, the armour on the Comet is not great. The only armour you really have is on the turret. But if you do not use that gun depression, then you actually end up exposing quite a few weak spots. I get lucky with that shot. You end up exposing For example, this dirty great big commander's hatch on the left. Now, if you're using all of your gun depression, the enemy have this sort of shot on you, that's a difficult shot. If you don't, that's an easy shot. More on that later. So I've put one shot into them. There's a Churchill 1 behind me, which is slightly problematic. He puts a shot into me, I bounce on him, frustratingly. And I'm just using my standard grinding equipment here. Put another shot into the Churchill, take one for my troubles, and finish him off. And that's one thing I've noticed. This tank has ammo racks in the side, which means that if you try and angle your armour even a little bit, you start having ammo rack problems. Now, I don't have safe stowage in this tank when I'm showing you this replay, but that is actually something to be aware of. So, Tiger P. Oh, he's looking at me, that's not good. Pull back. Owie. And there's a shot that goes straight through the front of my turret. The front of the turret on this tank is only about 100mm thick. If they shoot you where you don't have gun mantlet, don't be surprised to get penetrations. VK, side of him, I put a shot into him and then back off. And this is where it starts going rather awry. VK, I aim for his commander's hatch at the top and miss. He misses me though. And then I think, right, the armour I have is on the turret front, so I'm going to try and go hull down behind this bit of rubble. Sounds like an intelligent idea, right? Put a shot through the commander's hatch on the Tiger P there. That one misses. That one looks like it bounces, as in the shot that I take. That one misses again. The gun is quite accurate, but I didn't have a particularly great shot there. And the scores are currently 3 kills apiece. But oh dear, I might get a tank destroyer come up behind me in a minute, unless my team take him out, which would be very nice, but you know what them random teams are like. Oh, Jagdpanther. Oh dear. And there's the Tiger P again. If he comes out anymore, I'll have flanking shots into him. Worried about that Jagdpanther though, although he's on 116 health. If he comes around the corner right now, I can kill him. There we go. One dead Jagdpanther. But we are now losing 4 kills to 7, and I turn around to face off against these heavy tanks once more. Oh dear. And we've even lost our artillery. Christ, or one of them. KV3's calling for help. He's on a good chunk of health, and I need these guys to move out if I'm going to get flanking shots into them. So I'm trying to tell that KV3 to move back. If you move back, it encourages these guys to pull out, and then I can fill their flanks full of Dakar. Heavy tank moving out. I get a shot into the Tiger, but I take a shot there. And that ends up being the VK, who's being really rather irritating. Tiger P, put a shot into his side. Don't reload in time to get another one in. Oh dear. That was the VK. I'm not sure exactly what gun he's using. I think he might be using the short 88mm. Put a shot into him. But he kills me. No, I was a bit surprised. Yeah, he's using the short 88. And so I actually asked him in chat, are you firing premium ammunition? Long story short, no. No, he's not. All he was doing was aiming at that commander's hatch, which is a big fat weak spot, because although I was hull down over this bit of rubble and he doesn't have a particularly accurate gun, that's a big old weak spot. And I wasn't using all 12 degrees of my gun depression, i.e. I wasn't making that a harder shot by having people shoot me at that angle. It was a relatively easy shot. And so this turret won't reliably bounce anything if you are not using your full gun depression. That's the lesson I want you to take away from this replay. If you are not using your 12 degrees of gun depression in the Comet, you're almost doing it wrong. It needs to use that gun depression to survive. Now sometimes using that gun depression isn't really an option. And you could make the case that if on this map, if instead of coming into the town, if I'd played around the ridgeline at sort of E7, 8, maybe I'd have had more success and been able to use that gun depression, but I didn't, and this is what happened. So that's the lesson to learn from this replay. Having said that, take a look at the post-game results. and we'll get on to gameplay number 2. Here we go with game number 2, and as promised, this is a tier 9 game, i.e. we are bottom tier, and the Comet, as with many tier 7 medium tanks, really does like a good matchup. The penetration on its gun is a little bit lackluster. When you've got 148 penetration and you do 140 damage, you really are chipping away at higher tier tanks. So this is a standard game, and we're here on Westfield. Now, what I would probably do now with this, I mean, we're on the bottom spawn, which is irritating, but now I'd be very tempted to drive up to sort of the C3 region and try and use my gun depression on those hills. As it is, I don't do that, but we get an interesting game nonetheless, with some, well, interesting features, which we'll get onto in a second. Now, I do not know why, but our IS-8, who spawned at the top of the hill, has driven down to the bottom of the hill. I do not understand that. It's just, this is not a good place for an IS-8 to be. I'm sorry, it's just not. I don't know why he's done that. Ah well. Now, I am not being particularly aggressive, because I'm a tier 7 tank in a tier 9 game. I'm certainly not just going to YOLO forward and die. But I do want to make myself vaguely useful. So basically, see if I can find a bush, see if I can activate some binos and get some spotting, and oh, good lord, it's the rush of the light tank brigade. So I've probably been spotted. Put a shot into that AMX. Oh, I thought he was going to keep going, but he didn't. Second shot, kill that 1390, we lose a 5916. Another shot, one more will finish this guy off, and the Waffenträger, Borsig, kills him. And I now want to be moving because I don't want to get shot. Should point out there's no artillery in this game, so I was not in danger of getting SPG'd. So I backed off and now I'm moving forward again. I don't know why those two AMXs, they weren't platooned. I don't know why they just ran through the middle of the map. That was never a good idea. So Panther 2 is tracked. I have no idea where that shot went. It looked like it was going to hit, but apparently not. That one went high and bounced off the side of his turret by the look of it, which is kind of frustrating. Sorry about that. Now, moving forward into a more advanced position, our AMX 1375 is moving up along the top there to the right hand side. The IS-8 is down into the ravine, which is not a good position for him, and there's the Panther 2. Have a shot there to try and track him. Sounds like I damaged the track, but I didn't actually knock them out, alas. And I'm just having a look around my tank, and oh good lord, bunch of medium tanks. Right. Comet. Comet has good DPM. Comet is therefore dangerous, and I know I can put damage into him fairly easily. Track him. Bounce on him. Good lord, I'm getting some funny bounces, and we're losing 2-4. There we go, and now we start piling the shots in. And at this range, I'm not accurate enough to try and track him or anything like that. But we managed to take the guy out, and then I try and start working over this Pershing, but he has disappeared from view. And there we have the side of a Panther 2. T21 now. There we go, one into him. One more to kill this guy. There we go, kill number 2. There's the Pershing. We appear to have shots into the rear of his hull. No, he's not moving back that far. So we just fire a shot or two into the fog of war, where he was last spotted, in an attempt to try and put damage on him. Oh, the hill has gone very badly. That IS-8 really should have been up there, but that's not what he did, so what are you going to do? I, however, decide that, oh god, we need someone to spot these guys, we need someone to put pressure on them, so I move up. Try and use all of my gun depression to put in some flanking shots. IS-8. Maybe I should have shot the rear of that Foch, but never mind. IS-8's a relatively easy shot. I should really back off now. Oh, that one hurt. I think that was the Foch. Yep, top of the turret. So I back off. No shots into that Panther, alas. Oh, Foch is coming, Foch is coming. I do not want to take that Foch on, so I run like a little girl, but Foch appears to have just become distracted. Ooh, lost a good chunk of his health. And maybe I can now track him or put some damage into him or something like that. Oh, no, Borsig nails the Foch. Jolly good. So let's see if I can try and spot some of those guys, but Pershing is moving. Oh god, there's a Lerva over there. Okay, hopefully this Lerva is going to get absolutely roasted by our team, and oh Christ, all of the targets are coming up now. Okay, IS-8 kills their Panther 2. No, it looks like Lerva is looking at me, and I take a shot for my troubles, which is annoying, and then I back off. Oh dear. Right. Okay. 1390 just killed our IS-8. As in, our 1390 just killed our IS-8. Oh, for Christ's sake. He then takes out the Pershing. Oh, good lord. So, we're 1 kill down. They have the tank advantage, really. We've got 3 tier 8s and a tier 7. They have 2 tier 8s, 2 tier 7s, and a tier 9. Lerva is whinging and moaning and complaining about the IS-8. As well he might, but this game is not over yet. Have a shot at the Comet, but alas I miss, and then the Comet backs off. Hopefully the Borsig can do something about this Lerva. And I'm trying to act as scout here. Come on, see if I can spot him. Hopefully I'm not going to take shots from the Comet in the side. That could get messy quite quickly. Lerva spotted. Ooh, that one looked like it stung. That looked like it was a shot from the Borsig. That looked like high explosive from somebody. Oh, the other Lervas. Are these guys platooned? Yeah, they are. The other Lerva's moving down into our base. Borsig finishes that Lerva off. Right. This Lerva appears to be getting 1390'd. He gets 30. Oh no, he gets Borsigged, and we lose our 1390. Now, interesting moment. I start going up this way to try and get some spots, and then I decide to back down because I thought the Lerva and the T-29 were. Sorry. Oh, the Lerva's dead. I thought the Lerva and the T-29 were going to push down this way. The Lerva's going K6, J6, H6. But I'm trying to move up here to get some spots. The Lerva's saying, no, you want to go up onto the ridge above. I'm disagreeing because I didn't think I had the time. I thought these guys were going to rush around this corner and that I would have to put shots into them and spot them. I didn't realise that the Lerva was actually already dead. And I said, take too long. I thought these guys were going to come around. The fact that I haven't spotted them yet is interesting. And I keep saying, will take too long. Eventually, I come to the conclusion that actually the Lerva's right. It appears these guys are not just going to rush down that hill. And to be fair, I hadn't realised that the Lerva... Oh, actually, there might be an IS-8 over there as well. I hadn't actually realised that the Lerva was dead. So I then... Now, at this point, I could try and stick to my guns and you know, keep my pride and not do what the Lerva's been advising for the last 30 seconds. But why? The Lerva's advice is good. I was wrong. The guys did not just rush around. I need to spot them and flank them. So the Lerva's advice is good, and I agree entirely with it. And what I've done here is not followed the Lerva's advice per se. I've done what I thought was the right course of action, i.e. I stayed down there to spot these guys. When they weren't there to spot, I then changed my direction of approach. And I'm trying to spot these guys from the rear, and I'm hoping that I've got the Borsig giving me a hand. And there's the T-29. I missed that shot, which is really irritating. But I managed to kill the T-29 in the end. Now, there's an IS-8 down there. I decide not to take the short route, because if I take the short route, the IS-8 can just spot me, know that I'm coming, he'll know what awaits him, he'll know where I am. So instead I take the long route round here, trying to make sure that the IS-8, who is down at the bottom there, does not spot me. Oh, and the lurver says Comet is playing smart, no need for gold. Lol. He's obviously got his camera on my tank and is following my progress, but this is an IS-8, I don't want to take any chances. So I'm very cautiously going to approach this bush and try and spot this fellow. And we've taken out their Comet. There he is. Right. Now the lurver obviously doesn't have a shot, so I pull back at this point. Lurver's saying close in. I'd rather take him out from a distance. APCR bounces. APCR goes in. 2 more shots. I have a couple of blind ones here, I think. Now if the IS-8 had any sense... Ah, the guy had moved. He'd know exactly where I was. I must be in this bush. But apparently he's not the best driver in the world, so I'm trying to put shots down. That was at the top of his turret. Trying to put shots down into his hull. There's one. One more. Oh, he's moving. Fine. Spot him again. Pull back so that I'm not going to be spotted when I fire this shot. And side of the turret to kill him. And he's dead. And the lurver seemed to think that in the end I did quite a good job there. So just to clarify what I was doing at the end there. If you can see through a bush, that means that when you fire, you will lose the camo rating of that bush. You lose the camo rating of any soft cover within 15 meters of you when you fire your gun. If you are more than 15 meters away, the bush will be opaque, you will not be able to see through that bush, but the enemy will still remain spotted for a few seconds. So I was going forward, spotting him, pulling back, putting shots into him, going forward, spotting, pulling back, shooting, rinsing and repeating, so that never at any point in that whole sequence did I actually get spotted. Now, if the IS-8 had any common sense, he could have gone, right, he's in one of those bushes, I might as well just start blind firing those bushes. That one looks like a good start, let's shoot there. But he didn't do that. And in the end, it cost me a bit of premium ammunition to do it, because I wanted to try and make sure I took out that IS-8 at the end, and even with 200mm of premium penetration, I still bounced quite a lot of shots and missed a couple as he moved. So yeah, but I managed to do well in that game nonetheless, as you'll see in the post-battle results. And that was one of those examples where tactical use of your premium ammunition can really help carry a game. In that situation, I'm a tier 7 medium tank. If I had, potentially I could have rushed down and just tried to flank around the guy and shoot him in the bum, and that could have worked, but it could also have gone horribly wrong. I just needed to get unlucky with some of my shots, and, you know, he kills me. I mean, his average damage roll is 440. I have 449 health. If I just YOLO down there, there's a very good chance he can just kill me in one shot. That doesn't sound like a good idea, so I didn't do that. I played it a bit more cautiously and just used my premium ammunition there to try and take the guy out. I can't remember if I actually make a profit on that game. The premium ammo on this is quite expensive, and I think I fired 8 rounds of it in the end. But it was worth it, regardless. So, that was the Comet in a tier 9 game, still able to do very well, and this is a machine that I have very much a love-hate relationship with. But anyway, enough of that. Have a look at the post-battle results, and then we'll flip back to the garage.
So what do I think of this machine overall? Well, as you've already noticed, I've given it some special equipment, so as you might have gathered, I'm keeping it. I was a bit torn about that. It's kind of a love-hate relationship with this. Sometimes it works just wonderfully, and sometimes you just die. But I think this is a very good machine, and I think it's a machine that teaches you some very good concepts to carry over to a lot of the higher tier medium tanks. Good gun depression, using the armor that you have but not relying on it, things like that. I think this is a tank that if you're a very good player, you can do very well in. And I'm keeping it. I just kind of have fun in it, so I've still got it. I haven't got an Ace Tanker badge on this yet, which is kind of irritating, but I have got a Mark of Excellence. Hurrah! But yeah, I'm keeping it. I enjoy it. I have fun in it. Yes, it's another British medium tank I'm keeping, I know, but whatever. It's good fun. I enjoy it. Deal with it. So, I do recommend this. I think it's a pretty decent Tier 7 medium tank, and I think a lot of the Tier 7 mediums get a bad reputation because they seem to have the same guns as... Sorry, a lot of the Tier 7 mediums get a bad reputation because they appear to have basically the same guns as the Tier 6s, but I think they're a lot better than people give them credit for. This one included. I can't think of a bad Tier 7 medium that I've played so far, to be honest, and I've played quite a few of them. I'm sure I'll come across one at some point. But, you know, they're generally pretty good, actually, despite what a lot of people would have you believe, in my opinion. Anyway, I hope you guys found that interesting, possibly even vaguely informative. Good lord, I know. Spending your time on the internet and watching something that might make you learn something? Good lord. That'll never do. If you did enjoy it or find it informative, please feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.